Of all the things that you could have done, why did you choose to make an alternative meat protein? Why was that the most enticing way into this for you?
Sure. Well, let's just think about the problem. So, obviously, as I mentioned, there's a real animal welfare driver for me. But at the
Yeah.
same time, what we're doing is not sustainable. We cannot continue to raise and slaughter billions of animals for food because it's a massive user of the planet. Huge amounts of deforestation, huge amounts of water usage, major contributions to climate change. In fact, according to the United Nations, the animal agriculture industry contributes more greenhouse gas emissions than the entirety of the
Yes.
transportation sector combined. So
Yep.
just let
I'm
that
aware of
sink
that.
in. Raising animals for food is a bigger contributor to climate change than all cars, all trucks, all planes, all boats, all trains, all combined. And it's so easy for us to like point our fingers outward and say, "Hey, you fossil fuel companies, you're the problem." But we have to think about this introspectively as well and recognize that one of the things that most of us do every single day, which is eat animals, is such a major driver. There is no possible way we're going to stay within our climate goals of 1.5 C of warming without reducing the number of animals who we use for food. It's just not possible.
Mm.
And so then the question becomes, okay, well, how do we get to that? As I mentioned earlier, like you could just ask people to eat less meat. That's great. People don't have to necessarily become vegetarians. Um,
I agree.
to get to that point, right, where you're going to say, if everybody would, let's say, cut down on their meat by half, I mean, you could massively reduce the amount of deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions on the planet without one new person becoming vegetarian.
Yeah.
However, most people haven't shown an interest in this yet, and the facts are very overwhelming in favor of doing this for the environment, for animal welfare, for personal health and public health benefits. But the reality that we have to accept, the cards that we are dealt, is that people really want meat. And so, to answer your question directly, Ross, my view is that if we are serious about wanting to cut down on the number of animals who we're using for food, we have to give people the foods that they want, just produced in a much better way. In other words, in the
Mm.
same way that we give people cars that don't rely on gasoline, we can give them meat that doesn't rely on the slaughter of animals. So, how do you do it? Well, there's lots of different ways. I mentioned earlier, like with energy, you've got geothermal, you've got solar, you've got wind. These are all different paths of getting to that same end of producing clean energy. Well, there are many paths to getting to a animal-free meat product or animal-free dairy or eggs and so on.
Mm.
And one of them, which is the dominant method used, is just plant-based meat, right? You take foods like wheat or peas or soybeans and you convert them into things that look like hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and sausages. And that's what companies that are well known, like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, are doing. And those are good companies and they're making cool products, and I like eating them. However, they are expensive. They're more expensive than animal meat typically, and they still are relatively easily discerned from animal meat. They're not perfect replicas. Most of the time, you eat a Beyond Burger, even if you like it, you may think that you can tell that it's not actual animal meat. And so, if you don't want to use plants, you can then go to the animal kingdom and just take actual microscopic animal cells
Yep.
from animals and grow them without the animal. It's a
We've
process
interviewed
known
a
as.
few of those, which is
Oh,
also
cool.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so in my book, Clean Meat is largely about that topic. It's about how to grow real animal meat, not a meat substitute, not a meat replacement, not an alternative meat, but real animal meat from animal cells. And this is a really cool technology also, but it's plagued with current problems that are not prohibitive to its success by any means, but mean that it will not be on the market in any meaningful way in the coming handful of years. So plant-based meat is on you can get it at every Burger King in America, every major supermarket, Walmart, everything, right? They all have plant-based meat. But even the most well-funded of the cultivated meat companies assert that they don't plan to have product on supermarket shelves until the year 2030. So, we're recording this at the very end of 2023. So, you're talking like 6, 7 years before they're even going to have a product on the market. And plant-based meat has been on the market for decades, and it still is not even 1% by volume of total animal meat. You think about like solar, wind, geothermal, and the percentage they take up of our energy grid, and it's way more than 1%. But plant-based meat is still less than 1% of the volume of animal-based meat in the United States and even smaller around the world. And for cultivated meat to get to 1%, you're going to be, a decade, 2 decades. I don't know. It's very far off. I hope that something happens that changes the game, that makes what I'm saying turn out to be false. But I think even the most optimistic people think that in order to get to 1% of the domestic meat market, which would be more than 1 billion pounds of cultivated meat, you're talking about a very far off distance. And we don't have the time to wait. The earth is on fire literally now. And so we just don't have the time to wait. So there is a third way. You can go to the plant kingdom, you can go to the animal kingdom, but there's a third way, and it's the F word, fungi. And that's what we do at the Better Meat Co. Earlier, Ross, you mentioned mushrooms, kind of, but only tangentially
I knew
related.
I was going to get flack for that. I knew as soon as I put it, I was like, dang it.
There's
Swing
nobody
and a
who
miss.
loves... Yeah, not really. It's like a swing and a foul ball, maybe.
A foul ball.
Not
like
a total miss. Yeah. But look, nobody loves mushrooms more than I do, and you seem like a fun guy yourself, so I'm sure you love mushrooms too.
I dig it.
Thank you. But don't worry, we have a lot of room, maybe even too much room in this world for a lot of different ways to use fungi. And thank you. So we can use fungi in lots of different ways. Yes, you can grow mushrooms, but you can also grow mycelium, which is the root-like structure of the fungi. And you can grow it from microscopic spores. And what we do at the Better Meat Co. is we take microscopic spores, little microscopic fungi, and we subject them to a very special kind of fermentation that within less than 1 single day produces a product that comes out of the fermenter as a true meat alternative without almost any downstream processing whatsoever. And so in less than a day, we can go from inoculation of the fermenter to harvesting of the fermenter with a product that is more textured like meat than the current meat alternatives are, and is a single ingredient whole food alternative meat that on its own boasts an extremely impressive nutritional profile, meaning it has more protein than eggs, and it's a complete protein, meaning it has all the amino acids. It's got more iron and zinc than beef, and it's got more fiber than oats, more potassium than bananas, and it naturally contains vitamin B12, which is typically lacking in plant-based foods. In other words, you get all the things about meat that you want: the texture, the iron, the zinc, the protein, but you don't get all the things you don't want. You don't get the saturated fat, you don't get the cholesterol, you don't get the lack of fiber, and importantly, you don't get the enormous environmental and animal welfare footprint that slaughter-based meat brings with it. And so what we at the Better Meat Co. are seeking to do is to scale this technology. We've already been granted numerous patents on our technology, and now we're working to scale this technology so that we can actually create a river of our mycoprotein to flow through the food industry, allow humanity to enjoy the meat experience that it so craves, but with a much, much lighter footprint on the planet.